Howdy, everybody. Welcome back. Back at it again with another episode. Today, the symbolic labyrinth. Ancient Greeks in America. Subject I've spoke on, uh, you know, countless times. And yeah, I thought it would be appropriate discussing time, connecting everything to the Americas as I've done so endlessly now on this channel. But yeah, did old Homer's heroes visit America? Well, for those of you who've been following along for a while now, knows I believe Homer, the idea of perhaps originated here and found its way to the Mediterranean, Crete, Grecian, Athenian, so on. King Minos, the Minotaur, these astrological stories as well as literal, metaphorical. Their overlays exist in both the material and immaterial worlds. Time is precious. I appreciate you all. Let's get right into sharing this one. It doesn't seem to be. Okay. This is from the Richmond Times, August 5th, 1917. Again, did old Homer's heroes visit America? Puzzling discovery of the ancient Cretan labyrinth symbol among civilized Indian remains in our Southwest suggests prehistoric voyages of the Homeric Greeks to this continent. Now, for those that have been following along through Anomalous America, especially, but many of my discussions with Old World Florida, Dr. Longo, and on, the overlays with the quote ancient European roots, they seem to have their roots here in America, at least the oldest examples of them. And, many of the Phoenician, Carthaginian, Egyptian foundations do point to their roots coming from the West. I've hypothesized that even the biblical narratives of such, Noah and his journey from the Fertile Crescent or Gulf of Mexico um, into the Mediterranean, and the crazy amount of overlays that exist between the geometry of the Gulf of Mexico as well as the Mediterranean. The city overlays, name overlays, foot, boot, so many things between Florida and Italy, the peninsula, on and on and on and on. But yeah, I discussed this labyrinth symbol being found on items throughout Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado. And this article is going to go a little deeper into the kind of the symbology side of things and the correlations that exist. So again, I'll read captions and then we'll get into the meat. Right here it says, on the right is an outline of the Cretan labyrinth from a coin of ancient Crete. And on the left, the same symbol found on the Casa Grande in Arizona, in Lisi in our Southwest. So I've discussed Casa Grande. Check out my Anomalous America Arizona episode. I'll have a link in the description. The correlations between the tomb of a quote giant European is the term they used. Catholic. Don't like using the term Catholic. It's a giant man found in a stone tomb wearing a mitre. He had 6 toes, and the only description they could use to describe it was, one they would use to describe of a Catholic style burial. Again, the overlays between the symbology and, was this an ancient priest? Did Catholicism and the mitre and these symbols exist in an earlier example here in the American Southwest? I believe so. This description here that says the wandering of Ulysses described by Homer proved that the Greeks of the Homeric age were great voyagers and may have reached America. The picture is Ulysses and the Sirens by Herbert Draper. That's this image right here. And then down here it says seen from a gold signet ring of the Minoan age showing priestesses and the peculiar female type of that age. That's this one right here. This is on a ring. Very interesting. And then down here it says Theseus slaying the Minotaur and saving his fellow Athenians, an imaginative reconstruction of the central hall of the fabled Labyrinth from the painting by Hoffmann von Westenhoff. Now, in previous videos, I've discussed that the idea of the labyrinth exists on all continents and that perhaps this was kind of a mythological as well as literal overlay for describing the worlds of the underworld, the underground, and the journey um, that was required to get to some of these hidden underground cities. After this, I might do one more episode on the labyrinth. We'll see. I do have quite a bit of material on it, so I'm not sure exactly what I want to do, but I'm going to get into Inner Earth after this. And this is kind of why I started here and why I say that the labyrinth symbol is expressive of the inner world, metaphorically and literally, inside you, the energetic, etheric body, as well as the interior of the earth, right? The kind of hermetic, as above, so below, as within, so without overlay of this world we inhabit is just a mere copy of our individual selves. We'll get into that further. Let's jump into the article now. Starting over here on the far left. An American scholar, Harold Sellers Cotton of the University of Pennsylvania, has seriously raised the suggestion that the ancient Greeks were in communication with ancient pre-Columbian America. As his researches relate to the use in America of a symbol, the Cretan period of Greek civilization, they may lead to the conclusion that the heroes of the mysterious prehistoric Homeric age, which originated in Crete, were early voyagers to America. Again, I've stated endlessly that this is reversed. The oldest representations of the swastika, of many symbols, the cross, they originate here. All of the oldest representations of many of these symbols that are found all across the globe have, again, far more ancient representations in the Americas, North, South, Central. But yes, continuing on. Professor Cotton has found striking evidence that the labyrinth design associated with the horrible legendary Minotaur of the Minoan age of Crete has been familiar to our southwestern Indians from the earliest times. The similarity between this labyrinth design on an ancient Cretan coin and on certain Indian relics of the Southwest is so perfect that it appears to exclude all possibility of accidental coincidence. Yes, of course. I mean, the Grecian overlays in the Americas are found from, they've been found in just about every state I've covered. Roman, quote, Roman, Grecian, yeah, Etruria, Etruscan, because these overlays go in the Etruscan origins. Again, they point to the same thing, that they come from the Fertile Crescent, the first fertile land, to the Eden, the Gulf of Mexico, and yes, they have the same symbology and the same type of design. The clay usage, the artwork, the designs, even the terracotta is almost identical. In fact, the most advanced ancient examples of terracotta are found in Arizona, right? No coincidence again that we're dealing with the same area as Casa Grande, the temple, this incredible temple that had a king buried in the top story. But yes, again, sorry, the overlays are undeniable. The Pennsylvanian scholar was led to this discovery by an article in the American Anthropologist entitled A Fictitious Ruin in the Gila Valley, Arizona, by Dr. J. Walter Fuchs, the noted archaeologist of the Smithsonian Institution. In this article, Dr. Fuchs gives a picture of the labyrinth symbol as it had been first observed and copied by an 18th century Spaniard scratched in the sand by a Pima Indian. The point of Dr. Fuchs' article was that the symbol did not represent the plan of a ruin as previously supposed, but was used in some way as a game by the Indians called the House of Tihu or Tihuki, Chithuki. It immediately occurred to Professor Cotton that he had seen the same diagram on the reverse of a silver coin of Noessus in Crete. I murdered that, I apologize. Of the Greek period, BC 200 to 67. The figure represented the Minoan labyrinth and has been found on coins and in inscriptions in Crete back to the earliest period. A comparison of the Indian symbol with that of a coin showed that they were identical in every aspect. As the Cretan design represented a maze out of which it was exceedingly difficult for a person to find his way, it is necessarily a complicated figure. It is unquestionably very astonishing that this Cretan design should be found in early American Indian records, duplicated down to every line, every intricate curve, and every opening. In the Indian figure, as is shown in accompanying diagrams, there is, entirely separate from the labyrinth, a little addition which does not appear on the Greek coin. This addition is a small drawing of two upright pillars. It may not be without significance that these two pillars, forming part of some kind of altar, also occur frequently in early Cretan inscriptions. Again, the two pillars, the connections we're making. The earliest Masonic ideograms, pictographs, blah, 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 blah. Again, found here in the Americas. In fact, Masons of the early Americas in the early 1800s were buying them off of the Indians who said that the symbols were older than their fathers, blah, 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 right? And that they keep finding these Indians, in fact, the Indians living underground in a, quote, labyrinth in South America who were practicing Masonic ritual as well as knew the Ten Commandments and many other correlations. But the twin pillar symbolism here is very important. Dr. Fuchs points out that the symbol was early known to the Pima Indians as the diagram in slightly modified form appears scratched on the adobe wall of the ancient Casa Grande ruin among Indian pictographs. Therefore, it seems certain that it existed among the pre-Columbian Indians and could not have been introduced by the Spanish discoverers or by the Spanish traveler in his manuscript. We are therefore forced to one of the three conclusions. One, that the symbol originated in Europe and was carried to America in prehistoric times. Two, that it was carried from America in prehistoric times. Three, that it arose independently in prehistoric times. It did not arise independently. We've discussed that this is kind of the end all be all when it comes to these discoverers in the 1800s. That that they are faced with these three same points endlessly. Every time they find something, right, especially the cross and the swastika and these early symbolical representations, as well as again the story I made about early Aztec Bible stories. The story of Adam and Eve that existed in the Americas long before the story was put into what we would call, canon, so to say. And it makes you wonder, the Spanish, again, the destroying of the Mayan records and blah, 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 all the things that happened in the 1500s and things being rewritten. The Bible's been rewritten, the Torah, and then the introduction of Sharia and Talmudic law and all of these kind of later adjustment periods that happen with canon and biblical scripture. But again, I'll read that one more time. We are therefore forced to one of the three conclusions. And this is something that exists in just about every one of my videos, right? Whether I'm the one saying it or the author is poignant enough to present that same kind of stopping point, that the symbol originated in Europe and was carried to America in prehistoric times. Two, that it was carried from America in prehistoric times. Two is the most obvious option for me. Three, that it arose independently in prehistoric times. Nothing arose independently. They have this same conundrum, so to say, when they start discussing language and symbolism and all that stuff that I presented so endlessly. While it is frequently accepted by American authorities that such simple forms as the cross, the swastika, and the Wall of Troy design may have originated independently in the New World as well as the Old, it is hard to believe that such complicated labyrinths, similar in every detail, could have had separate origins. Of course, they did not. Similar environments often call forth similar responses in different organisms. In such cases, the similarities between carefully and analyzed are found to be superficial. The details will not agree. In the case of the two labyrinths, however, the agreement is exact. The history of the picture reproduced by Dr. Fuchs does not prove beyond question that it is of genuine American Indian design, but there are many facts which confirm its authenticity. An unknown Spanish traveler visited the Pima country in the year 1761 and left an account of his visit in the form of a manuscript. On the margin of one of the pages of the manuscript appears the picture of the symbol. According to the Spanish writer, the Pimas drew the picture in the sand. He stated that it represents a house of amusement rather than that of a magnet. House of amusement. Now, the isn't that funny that these kind of amusement parks of the early 1800s, mid 1800s, late 1800s, that the um, labyrinth was an amusement, an attraction. So funny that the oldest representation of that again is these Indians. As Dr. Fuchs has never heard of a ruin with such a ground plan, he has led to question an old Pima Indian known as Higgins about it. When Higgins was shown the figure and told the opening lines of the quotation from the Spanish narrative, the statement about the uses of the house being withheld, he answered that he knew of no ancient house in that region which had a ground plan like the indicated in the figure. Again, it's not a ground plan because these labyrinths that they have found, the Cretan one, the Egyptian one, which they did find, at least found some of it, most of it in ruins, these are all subterranean. He was, however, acquainted with a children's game that employed a similar figure traced in the sand. The Pimas, he said, called the figure Tihuhuki, meaning the house of Tichu, a cultist hero sometimes identified with Montezuma. Hmm, go figure. But how are we to explain the apparent connection between ancient Cretan civilization and our formerly civilized American Indians? Remember, Montezuma stated himself, and they were identified. Montezuma and Tenochtitlan in Mexico City, as later been pronounced, but Tenochtitlan was called the original Venice, and the Grecian, Roman overlays of Tenochtitlan, with Atlantis and many other quote European designations are endless. And even he himself said they came to this abandoned place. The prehistoric ruins of our southwest of Mexico, Central America, and South America are continually proving the antiquity of civilization on this continent. Indeed, they are. It has recently been shown, for instance, that at Mesa Verde, we have a sun temple older than Stonehenge. Many, many temples. Huge. The largest stone ruins ever discovered in the world, still to this day, or were discovered and obviously were torn to pieces, were found in the American Southwest. On the other hand, recent discoveries in Europe have traced the origins of ancient Greek civilization to the island of Crete. And it was in Crete that the famous labyrinth of King Minos was, whose reproduction has just been found among early American antiquities, existed. In Crete, too, was the cave of Deity, revered in the earliest times as the birthplace of Zeus, the father of all the Greek gods. The actual altar which commemorated the god's birth in this cave is one of the many wonderful discoveries which have been made in recent years by Professor Hogarth and Evans, the English archaeologists. In Crete arose the Homeric civilization of Greece, which was entirely distinct from that of the Greek historical period. The age of Socrates and Pericles and the other famous Greeks who are usually spoken of as representative of Greek civilization. There is a great dark blank between the historical period and the age described by Homer. Indeed, and that dark period is, as I've said so many times, like the Dark Ages, a kind of corruption of time and used to explain away and hide connecting factors, again, that often link to America and that kind of transitory period, pre 1800s, pre 1700s. The civilization of the earlier period was entirely different from the latter, simpler in those in some ways and yet superior in others. To this earlier period belong the story of Paris and Helen, the siege of Troy, the anger of Achilles, the valor of Hector, and the deeds of Ajax and Agamemnon, the love of Andromache, and the wanderings of much enduring Ulysses, and the trials of his faithful wife Penelope. It was an age in which kings appear to have tilled their own fields and lived in a patriarchal manner. It showed its superiority by the freedom and comparative equality accorded to women as compared with their position of restraint. Yeah, we talk about the overlays of this period that they're discussing match almost identically with the kind of uh, ancient quote Indian, the Queen Moose subject matter that I've been discussing. Archaeological research has shown that this early civilization spread from Crete to Greek mainland, and that it was built the great cities of Mycene and Tyrannus, which have been unearthed in modern times. Again, I've talked about some of these Grecian cities, quote Grecian cities, and they were buried and buried and buried. And the same things that buried the Grecian cities that we found in Alaska in the 1800s. I'm sure an event similar to that buried these ones as well. Perhaps it is the biblical flood that we've been discussing. On the island of Crete, civilization reached its height under the Minoan kings. The island occupied the greatest strategic position in the Mediterranean, and its ships traded to all parts of the civilized world, perhaps even to America, using the calm route across the Atlantic by way of Gibraltar in the West Indies. Remains of the great docks and harbor works existed in Crete in the Minoan age have been found recently, and they look just like the ancient docks and canal systems that they find all over Florida, Texas, and into Arizona. Now, I've postulated that you could take a boat from the Gulf of Mexico all the way into Arizona, and that you could do the same from the other side, that California has an island that you could bypass the Red Sea, which is the sea that separated the island of California from the mainland. You could follow that as well all the way into Arizona, up into Salt Lake. The Greeks of the Homeric and Minoan period were evidently great sailors. They were much more devoted to the sea than the Greeks of the classical period. This is proved by Homer's story of the wanderings of Ulysses in the Odyssey, the first great sea story. That book has a pretty strong bearing on my childhood, as I am a lover of the ocean, and I am no captain, but I call myself a sailor, and I've spent quite a few trips on sailboats, and consider it a beautiful kind of fantasy that I'll probably live out later in life and spend more time on a boat. But anyways, that book, that story, if you're not familiar with it, I definitely recommend it. There's audio versions for those who don't have time to actually sit down and read a book. It's an amazing story, and the idea that, again, we're dealing with written historical stories and not just metaphorical is pretty powerful. And such facts have an evident bearing on the possibility of early communication between the Greeks and America. It's a subject I've discussed endlessly. Just check out some of my um, um, mirrored videos I have on my channel. Talks with Dr. Longo at Old World Florida. If you're not familiar with his channel, check it out. He's got a video playlist that is quite endless about the correlations between the Greeks and America. In the present state of our knowledge, it is more reasonable to believe that the highly intelligent and enterprising Greeks went to America rather than the pre-Columbian Americans cruised to the Mediterranean. Again, the evidence that this gentleman has is not quite as extensive as what I presented, but this is the as he stated earlier, of the three choices. One is that they came to these conclusions independently, which is absurd. That's like saying all the overlays between the languages and the pictographs and the symbolism is a coincidence, which it obviously is not. And that the oldest versions of Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden, Noah, they exist here in the Americas as well. Again, not just speak. It's endless. It's endless. With vessels like that of Ulysses, it would have been quite practical to travel to America by the calm tropical belt. Then we must remember the vast mass of ancient legends concerning a lost continent called Atlantis, which extended a great distance westward in the Atlantic Ocean. Many scholars believe that this was really Crete, while others have argued that it was northern Africa, which approaches much nearer America than any other part of Europe. King Minos, the founder of the Minoan dynasty, was, according to fable, the father of the monstrous Minotaur and the man-headed bull. The monster was kept in a labyrinth in the royal palace, and every year the Athenians were compelled to send 7 maidens and 7 youth as a tribute to the monster. 7 and 7. This is kind of this arching symbolism there is quite powerful. The 7 sleepers. And one of the most beautiful of ancient Greek legends tells us how the splendid Athenian youth Theseus, with the help of Eridine, daughter of King Minos, slew the Minotaur and found his way out of the labyrinth, thus saving his countrymen from the cruel tribute to which they had been subjected. This fable must be regarded as an echo of the subjection in which the Minoan kings kept of the people of the mainland. It is certain, however, that pictures of bulls and of boys and girls fighting bulls constantly occur among the decorations of the buildings of the Minoan period. Again, the slaying of the bull, you guys, the goddess Nike and um, the astrological evidence for that and the slaying of the age of Taurus and all of these things are pretty powerful. And there's, just as much, if not more, mythological as well as astrotheological references to this idea. But as I've suggested many times, that there, I believe, is often a metaphorical and literal representation of these myths. And that's just kind of what they're touching on here, as these labyrinths have been found all over the world. It is certain, however, the pictures. Yep. It is supposed that the Athenian captives may have been forced to sacrifice their lives in this sport. An actual labyrinth has been found in Gnosis. I'm going to say that wrong, so my apologies, Greek city. The labyrinth, like other constructions of King Minos' civilization, is reputed to have been the work of Daedalus, the inventor of the first flying machine. From that early period, the curious design of the labyrinth was the usual symbol of Crete and continued to be so until comparatively late in historical Greek times. Now we are confronted with the strange fact that primitive Americans also used this symbol. Indeed, we are confronted with this strange fact. And I want to end this with repeating of the one of three choices, ones that I've said so many times and it's rare to find written. We are therefore forced to one of the three conclusions: that the symbol originated in Europe and was carried to America in prehistoric times. Two, that it was carried from America in prehistoric times. Three, that it arose independently in prehistoric times. And I'll let you come to that own conclusion. And I appreciate you joining me for another episode. And I appreciate all of you so very much following me along. And again, welcome to the new year, 1/8. Um, yeah, hope you're enjoying the material. I'm going to be doing a little bit of material coming up on inner earth, inner beings. We're going to kind of tie this in with biblical descriptions, how they described the earth being, hollow, and just kind of some of the correlations and what scientists thought in that period of time, and the importance of such, as I've stated early on, that the labyrinth being the symbol, uh, um, metaphorical as well as literal symbol of inner earth. But yeah, appreciate you all very much. Thanks for joining me as always. Have a great day and see you very soon. Bye, guys.